It was afternoon. Havelaar, coming out of his room, found Tyne in the foregallery, waiting for him at the tea table. Madame Slotering had just left her house and seemed to have the intention of going to Havelaar's, but suddenly she went to the gate, and there, with very violent gestures, sent back a man who had just entered. She remained standing still till she felt sure that he had gone away, and then returned along the grass field to Havelaar's. "I will know at last what this means," said Havelaar. And when the salutation was over he asked, jokingly, that she might not think he grudged her influence in grounds which formerly were hers. "Now, madam, do tell me why you always send back the men who come into the grounds. What if that man, for instance, had fowls to sell, or any other kitchen requisite?" There was in the face of Madame Slotering a painful expression, which did not escape Havelaar's observation. "Ah," she said, "there are so many bad men." "Certainly, that is the case everywhere, but if you are so particular, the good ones will stay away too. Come now, madam, tell me why you keep such a sharp lookout over the grounds." Havelaar looked at her, and endeavored in vain to read the reply in her watery eyes. He again pressed for an explanation, and the widow burst into tears, saying that her husband had been poisoned at Parangkujang in the house of the district chief. "He would do justice, Mr. Havelaar," continued the poor woman. "He wished to put an end to the oppression of the people. He exhorted and threatened the chiefs in councils and in writing. You must have found his letters in the archives." That was the case. Havelaar had read those letters, of which I have copies before me. "He spoke repeatedly to the resident," continued the widow, "but always in vain, for as it was generally known that the extortion was for and under the protection of the regent, whom the resident would not complain of to the government, all these conversations had no other effect than the ill treatment of the complainants. Therefore my poor husband had said that if no alteration should be made before the end of the year, he would apply direct to the Governor-General. That was in November. A few days later he made a journey of inspection, took his dinner at the house of the Demang of Parangkujang, and soon afterwards was brought home in a pitiable condition. He cried, while pointing to his stomach, 'Fire, fire,' and in a few hours he was dead, he who had always been remarkable for good health." "Did you send for the Serang doctor?" asked Havelaar. "Yes, but my husband died soon after his arrival. I did not dare to tell the doctor my suspicion, because I foresaw that I should not be able soon to leave this place, and I feared revenge. I have heard that you, like my husband, oppose the abuses which reign here, and therefore I have not a moment's peace. I would have concealed all this from you to avoid frightening you and Madame Havelaar, and so I only watched the grounds to prevent strangers from entering the kitchen." Now it was clear to Tyne why Madame Slotering had kept her own household, and would not even make use of the kitchen, which was so large. Havelaar sent for the controller. Meanwhile he sent a request to the physician at Serang to make a statement of the symptoms attending the death of Slotering. The reply which he received the next day to that request was not in accordance with the widow's suspicions. According to the doctor, Slotering had died of an abscess in the liver. I do not know whether such a disease can manifest itself suddenly and cause death in a few hours. I think I must bear in mind the evidence of Madame Slotering, that her husband had formerly been always healthy. But if no value is attached to such evidence, because the notion of what is called health varies with different persons, particularly in the eyes of non-medical individuals, yet the important question remains whether a person who dies today of an abscess in the liver could ride on horseback yesterday with the intention of inspecting a mountainous country, which is in some directions 80 miles in extent. The doctor who treated Slotering may have been a skillful physician, and yet have been mistaken in his judgment of the symptoms of the disease, unprepared as he was to suspect crime. However this may be, I cannot prove that Havelaar's predecessor was poisoned, because Havelaar was not allowed time to clear up the matter. But I can prove that everyone believed in the poisoning, and that this was suspected on account of his desire to oppose injustice. The controller Verbrugge entered Havelaar's room. The latter asked abruptly, "What did Mr. Slotering die of?" "I don't know." "Was he poisoned?" "I don't know, but—" "Speak plainly, Verbrugge." "But he endeavored to oppose the abuses, as you do, and he would certainly have been poisoned if he had remained here longer." "Write that down." Verbrugge wrote it. It lies before me. To proceed, is it true or untrue that much extortion is committed in Lebak? Verbrugge made no reply. Answer me, Verbrugge. I dare not. Write down that you dare not. Verbrugge wrote it down. It lies before me. Well, to proceed, you dare not answer the last question. You told me lately, when there was a question about poisoning, that you were the only support of your sisters at Batavia. Is that the reason of your fear of what I always called your halfness? Yes. Verbrugge wrote it down. His declaration lies before me. That will do, said Havelaar. I know enough. And Verbrugge left. Havelaar went out and played with little Max, whom he kissed very fervently. When Madame Slotering was gone, he sent away the child and called in Tyne. Dear Tyne, I have a favor to ask you. I should like you and Max to go to Batavia. Today I accuse the regent. She fell on his neck, for the first time opposed to his wishes, and cried, sobbing. No, Max, I will not go. I will not go. We eat and drink together. Was Havelaar wrong when he made out that she had as little right to blow her nose as the women at Arles? He wrote and dispatched the letter of which I here present a copy, after I have given a slight sketch of the circumstances under which that letter was written. I believe that it is not necessary for me to show the circumspection which he observed, while not uttering a syllable of the discovery just made, not to weaken his positive accusation by the uncertainty of a very important, but as yet unproved accusation. His intention was to exhume the corpse of his predecessor, and to have it scientifically examined as soon as the regent should have been removed and his party made harmless. But as I have already said, he was not allowed the opportunity of doing this. In the copies of official documents, copies which strictly conform with the originals, I think I may use single pronouns instead of the foolish titles. I expect that the good taste of my readers will approve of this change. Number 88, Private Immediate. Rankas Batong, 24th February 1856. To the resident of Bantam. Since returning a month ago to my duties here, I have occupied myself principally in examining how the chiefs discharge their obligations towards the population as regards statute labor, pundutin, and such like. I very soon discovered that the regent, on his own responsibility, and for his advantage, summoned the population to work for him, far above the legally authorized number of panchins or chemits. I hesitated between the choice of sending at once an official report and the desire to make this native functionary change his policy by gentle means, or even afterwards by threats, in order to attain the double purpose of putting an end to abuse, and at the same time not acting too severely against this old servant of the government, particularly considering the bad examples which, I believe, have often been set before him. And in connection with the peculiar circumstance that he expected a visit from two relations, the regents of Bombang and Tijandur, at least of the latter, who, as I hear, is already coming with a large train, and he being thus more than usually in temptation, and with regard to the critical embarrassment of his pecuniary circumstances, as it were obliged, to provide by unlawful means the necessary preparations for that visit. All this made me incline to moderation, with regard to what had already happened, but not at all to indulgence for the future. I insisted upon the immediate cessation of every unlawful act. I made you acquainted with that previous experiment to induce the regent by moderation to do his duty. Yet it is evident to me that he casts all to the winds with rude insolence, and I feel bound to communicate to you in virtue of my official oath, that I accuse the regent of Lebak, Radin Adhipati, Karda Nata Negara, of abuse of power, by disposing unlawfully of the labor of his subordinates, and suspect him of extortion while exacting productions in natura, without payment, or for prices arbitrarily fixed. That I suspect, moreover, the Demang of Parangkujang, the regent's son-in-law, of complicity in the above-mentioned abuses. In order conclusively to prove both these charges, I take the liberty of proposing to you to order me. 1. To send the regent of Lebak with the utmost speed to Serang, and to take care that he shall not have occasion, either before his departure or during the journey, to influence by corruption or in any other way the witnesses. I require. 2. Previously to take the Demang of Parangkujang into custody. 3. To apply the same measure to such persons of inferior rank as belonging to the family of the regent, may be expected to mar the impartiality of the examination to be instituted. For to order that examination to take place immediately, and to report circumstantially on the issue. I take the liberty of submitting to your consideration the advisability of countermanding the visit of the Regent of Tijanjar. Finally, I have the honor to give you, as one who knows the district of Lebak better than it is as yet possible for me to know it, the assurance that, from a political point of view, the strictly just treatment of this affair has no difficulty at all, and that I should be rather apprehensive if it was not cleared up. For I am informed that the poor man is, as a witness told me, posing, tired, sick, disgusted of all the vexation he has suffered, and that he has long sought relief. I have partly derived the strength to fulfill my difficult duty in writing this letter, from the hope that I may be allowed in due time to bring forward one or two excuses for the old regent, for whose position, though caused by his own fault, I nevertheless feel great compassion. The assistant resident at Lebak. Signed, Max Havelaar. The next day the resident of Bantam replied, "No, but Mr. Slimering did so in a private letter." That reply is a precious contribution to the knowledge of how the government is carried on in Dutch India. Mr. Slimering complained that Havelaar had not first communicated verbally to him the affair mentioned in the letter No. 88, of course, because then there would have been more chance of arranging matters, adding, moreover, that Havelaar disturbed him in pressing business. The man was surely busy in writing the yearly report on tranquility. I have that letter before me, and do not trust my eyes. I read once more the letter of the assistant resident of Lebak. I compare Havelaar and Slimering. This Schalman is a low beggar. You must know, reader, that Bastianus is again very often absent from the office, because he has gout. Now, as I cannot reconcile it with my conscience to throw away the funds of the firm, Last & Co. For where principles are concerned, I am immovable. I thought the day before yesterday that Schalman wrote a good hand, and as he looked so very poor that he could therefore certainly be got for small wages. I therefore thought that it was my duty to provide in the cheapest manner for the removal of Bastianus. I went accordingly to Schalman's house in the Lange Lage Dwarstraat. The woman of the shop was at the door, but she seemed not to recognize me, though I had lately told her that I was Mr. Dristable, coffee broker, of the Laurier Canal. There is always a sort of insult in such a non-recognition, but as it was now not so cold, and as I wore last time I was there my coat trimmed with fur, I ascribed it to that, and think nothing of it, I mean the insult. I said therefore again that I was Mr. Dristable, of the Laurier Canal, coffee broker, and begged her to go and see if Schalman was in, because I did not wish, as on the last occasion, to have to speak to his wife, who is always discontented. But the woman refused to go upstairs. She could not walk up and down stairs the whole day for that beggarly family, said she, but I could go and look for myself. And then followed again a description of the staircase and doors, which I had no need of, for I always know a place where I have been once, because I pay such attention to everything. I have got accustomed to that in my business, so I went upstairs and knocked at the well-known door, which opened. I entered, and as I saw nobody in the room, I looked round. There was not much to be seen. A child's trousers with an embroidered stripe hung over a chair. Why need such people wear embroidered trousers? In a corner stood a not very heavy traveling box, which I lifted up by the hinge, and on the mantelpiece there were some books, which I looked at. A curious collection. A couple of volumes of Byron, Horace, Basquiat, Beringer, and, do guess, a Bible, a complete Bible with the Apocrypha. This I had not expected of Schalman. It appeared also to have been read, for I found many notes on loose pieces of paper relating to the Scriptures, all written in the same handwriting as the pieces in that unwelcome parcel. Above all, he seemed to have studied carefully the book of Job, for there the leaves bore the marks of it. I think that he begins to feel the chastisement of the Lord, and will therefore reconcile himself to God by reading the Holy Scriptures, and I am not opposed to that. But while waiting, my eye caught sight of a lady's workbox which stood on the table. Without thinking about it, I looked at it. There were in it a pair of half-finished child's stockings, a lot of foolish verses, and a letter addressed to Schalman's wife, as could be seen by the inscription. The letter was open, and it seemed as if it had been rumpled with some anger. Now it is a firm principle with me never to read anything that is not addressed to me, because I do not think it respectable. I never do such a thing when I have no interest in it. But now I got an inspiration that it was my duty to read this letter, because the contents would perhaps further me in the humane intentions that made me go to Shalman. I thought about it, how the Lord is always near to those who believe in him, as he gave me here quite unexpectedly an opportunity to know a little more about this man, and protected me too from the danger of performing an act of charity to an immoral person. I pay much attention to such directions of the Lord. This has done me a great deal of good in business. With much surprise, I saw that the wife of Shalman belongs to a respectable family. The letter, at least, was signed by a relation whose name in Holland is respected, and I was indeed in ecstasies with the beautiful contents of those lines. It appeared to be from a person who labored zealously for the Lord, for he wrote that the wife of Shalman ought to be divorced from such a wretch, who made her suffer poverty, who could not earn his livelihood, who was, moreover, a rascal because he had debts. That the writer of the letter pitied her condition, though that condition was her own fault, because she had forsaken the Lord and stuck to Shalman. That she ought to return to the Lord, and that in that case her family would all of them assist her and furnish her with needlework, but before all things she ought to put away this Shalman, who was a disgrace to the family. In a word, you could not get in church itself more piety than was to be found in this letter. I knew enough and was grateful to have been warned in such a miraculous way. Without this warning, I should certainly have become a victim of my own good heart. I resolved, therefore, again to keep Bastianus till I could find a fitter person to take his place, for I do not like to turn anyone to the streets. The reader will be curious to know how I got on at the Rosemeyers' last party. I was not there. Wonderful things have happened. I had gone to Driebergen with my wife and Mary. My father-in-law, old Mr. Last, the son of the first Last, the Mayers were then still in the firm, but they have left it long ago, said some years ago that he should like to see my wife and Mary. Now it was very fine weather, and my fear of the love history with which Stern had menaced us made me think all at once of this invitation. I spoke of it to our bookkeeper, who is a man of experience, and who, after mature deliberation, recommended me to sleep a night on it. This I intended immediately to carry out, for I am quick in the execution of my decisions. The following day I perceived already how wise this advice was, for during the night I got the idea that I could not do better than delay my decision till Friday. In a word, after having carefully considered all things, there was much in favor of the plan, but also much against it. We went on Saturday afternoon, and came back on Monday morning. I would not tell you all this, if it was not in connection with my book. First of all, I think it necessary that you should know why I do not protest against the nonsense which Stern certainly brought out last Sunday. What nonsense is that about a person who would hear when he was dead? Mary mentioned it to me. She had heard it from the Rosemeyers, who trade in sugar. Secondly, because I am now again convinced that all those stories about misery and trouble in the East Indies are downright lies. Thus it may be seen how traveling gives a person the opportunity to penetrate deeply into affairs. Saturday evening, for instance, my father-in-law had accepted an invitation from a gentleman who had been formerly a resident in the East Indies and who lives now at a large country seat. We went there, and indeed, I cannot sufficiently praise the excellent reception we met with. Our host sent his carriage to fetch us, and the coachman had on a red waistcoat. Now it was certainly a little too cold to inspect the country seat, which must be magnificent in the summer, but in the house itself there was nothing to desire, for it was replete with luxury: a billiard room, a library, a covered iron and glass conservatory, and a cockatoo on a silver perch. I never saw such a thing. I made the observation how good conduct is always rewarded. That man had been attentive to his business was evident, for he had more than 3 orders of knighthood. He had a beautiful country seat, and moreover, a house in Amsterdam. At the supper all was truffé, and even the servants who waited at table wore red waistcoats, like the coachman. As I take great interest in Indian affairs, because of the coffee, I began a conversation on the subject, and perceived very soon what I had to think about it. This resident told me that he was always very well off in the East Indies, and that there was, therefore, not a word of truth in those stories of discontent among the population. I turned the conversation upon Shalman. He knew him, and that unfavorably. He said that the government had done well in dismissing him, for that this Shawman was a very discontented person who made remarks about everything, and there was, moreover, much to disapprove in his own conduct. For instance, he was always running away with girls and bringing them home openly before his wife. He did not pay his debts, a thing which is very unseemly. As I knew so exactly from the letter one had read how well-founded this accusation was, I was very well pleased to find that I had judged of all so correctly, and was quite satisfied with myself. I am also known for this at the exchange. I mean for always possessing a sound judgment. This resident and his wife were agreeable and kind. They told us much of their manner of life in the Indies. It must be very pleasant there. They said that their country seat near Driebergen was not half so large as what they called their grounds, in the interior of Java, and that 100 men were required to keep it in order. But, and this is a proof how they were liked, all this was done for nothing, and out of pure attachment. They told us also that when they went away the sale of their furniture had produced a large profit, as it fetched 10 times its value. For that the native chiefs were all of them so fond of buying a keepsake of a resident. I told this afterwards to Stern, who maintained that this was done by coercion, and that he could prove it out of Schallmann's parcel. But I told him that this Schallmann was a slanderer, that he had run away with girls, like that young German at Busselink and Waterman's, that I did not attach the least value to his judgment, for that I had now learnt from a resident himself how matters stood, and had therefore nothing to learn from Schallmann. There were still more persons from the Indies, amongst others a very rich gentleman, who had gained much money on tea, which the Javanese made him for little money, and which the government bought from him for a high price to encourage the activity of the Javanese. This gentleman was also very angry with all those discontented persons, who are always speaking and writing against the government. He could not say enough in praise of the government of the colonies, for he said that he had the conviction that it lost a great deal in tea, which it bought from him, and that was therefore very generous in invariably paying such a high price for an article intrinsically of little value, which he himself did not like, for he always drank Chinese tea. He said also that the Governor-General, who had prolonged the so-called tea contracts, notwithstanding the calculation that the nation lost so much on this, such a clever, good man was he, and, above all, a good friend of those who had known him formerly. For that this Governor-General had not paid the least attention to the talk about losses on the tea, and had done him therefore a great deal of good by not cancelling those tea contracts. Yes, he went on, my heart bleeds, when I perceive that such noble persons are slandered. If he had not been there, I should have to walk with my wife and children. Thereupon he ordered his carriage, and it looked so magnificent, and the horses were so beautiful and so fat, that I can understand why he is full of gratitude to such a Governor-General. It does one's heart good to behold such charming emotions, above all when comparing them with that accursed grumbling and complaining of persons like that Schallmann. The following day, the resident and that gentleman for whom the Javanese make tea returned our visit. Both of them at once asked us by what train we thought of going to Amsterdam. We did not know what this meant, but afterwards it was clear to us. For when we arrived there on Monday morning, there were 2 servants at the station, one with a red waistcoat and one with a yellow one, who both at the same time told us that he had received an order by telegram to fetch us in a carriage. My wife was confused, and I thought what would Busselink and Waterman have said if they had seen that. I mean that there were 2 carriages for us, but it was not easy to make a choice, for I could not resolve to hurt one of the parties by refusing such a nice offer. Good advice was dear, but I came victorious out of this great difficulty. I put my wife and Mary in the red carriage, the red waistcoat I mean, and I went in the yellow one, I mean the carriage. How those horses tore along. On the Whisper Street, where it is always so dirty, the mud flew as high as the houses, and there I saw the miserable Schallmann, his back bent, his head bowed down. And I saw how he tried to wipe the mud off his pale face with the sleeve of his threadbare coat. Chapter 19. In the private letter which Mr. Slimering sent to Havelaar, he communicated to him that he, notwithstanding his pressing business, would come the next day to Rankesbytong to deliberate on what ought to be done. Havelaar, who knew what such a deliberation meant, his predecessor had so often deliberated with the resident of Bantam, wrote the following letter, which he sent to meet the resident and be read by him before his arrival at Lebec. No 91, private, immediate. Rank as by Tong, 25th Feb. 1856, 11 p.m. Yesterday at 12 o'clock, I had the honor to send you my missive, immediate, number 88, containing in substance that I, after a long investigation, and after having tried in vain to bring back by moderation the party concerned from his perversity, felt myself obliged by my official oath to accuse the regent of Lebec of abuse of power, and to add that I suspected him of extortion. I have taken the liberty to propose to you in that letter to summon that native chief to Serang in order to examine after his departure, and after the corrupting influence of his extensive family had been neutralized, whether my accusation and suspicion were well-founded. Long, or to speak more accurately, much have I reflected before determining upon this. I took care to let you know that I have endeavored, by exhortation and threats, to save the old regent from misfortune and shame, and myself from the deep regret of having been the immediate cause of his troubles. But on the other hand, I saw the, for many years, plundered and much oppressed population. I thought of the necessity of an example, for I shall have to report to you many more vexations, if, at least this affair, by its reaction makes no end of them. And, I repeat it, after mature consideration, I did what I thought to be my duty. I have just received your kind and esteemed private letter communicating that you will come here tomorrow, and at the same time, a hint that I ought to have treated this affair privately at first. Tomorrow, I shall therefore have the honor to see you, and it is exactly on that account that I have taken the liberty to send you this letter, to add, before our meeting, the following considerations. All my investigations about the regent were quite secret. Only he and the Pate, adjutant of the regent, knew it, for I myself had frankly warned him. Even the controller knows only a part of my investigations. This secrecy had a double aim. At first, when I still hoped to bring back the regent to the right way, it was my object if I succeeded not to compromise him. The Pate thanked me in the name of the regent for this discretion. It was on the 12th inst. But afterwards, when I began to despair of the success of my endeavors, or rather, when the measure of my indignation overflowed on hearing of a recent occurrence, when a longer silence would have become participation as an accomplice, then that secrecy would have been to my advantage, for I too have to fulfill duties towards my household and myself. For after writing my letter of yesterday, I should be unworthy to serve the government, if what I wrote down then was vain, unfounded, or invented. And would or will it be possible to me to prove that I have done what a good assistant resident ought to do, to prove that I am not unworthy the functions which I have received, to prove that I do not risk thoughtlessly and rashly my 17 hard years in the service of the government, and, what is of more importance still, the interest of wife and child? Will it be possible for me to prove all this, unless deep secrecy does not hide my investigations and prevent the criminal from concealing himself? At the least suspicion, the regent would send an express to his nephew, who is coming here, and whose interest it is to maintain him, at any sacrifice, and to distribute money with a profuse hand to everyone whom he had recently swindled. The consequence would be, I need not say will be, that I have passed a rash judgment, and am an unserviceable functionary, not to say worse. To prevent that result, I write this letter. I have the highest esteem for you, but I know the spirit of East Indian functionaries, and I do not possess that spirit. Your hint that it would have been better to have treated the affair privately at first makes me apprehensive of such a course. What I said in my missive of yesterday is true, but perhaps it would seem untrue if the affair was treated in such a manner as would reveal my accusation and suspicion before the removal of the regent. I may not conceal from you that even your unexpected arrival in connection with the express sent by me yesterday to Serang gives me reason to fear that the accused, who would not listen to my exhortations, will now awake too soon and endeavor, if possible, tant soit peu to exculpate himself. I have the honor to say that I still refer literally to my missive of yesterday, but I take the liberty to observe that this missive contained a proposal to remove the regent before the investigation, and previously to make his adherents harmless, and at the same time that I believe myself to be no further responsible for what I advanced, than so far as you may be pleased to agree to my proposition as regards the manner of investigation, that it should be impartial, open, and above all, free. This liberty cannot exist before the removal of the regent, and according to my humble opinion, there is nothing dangerous in that, as he can be told that I accuse him and suspect him, that I am in danger, and not he, in the event of his innocence being established. For I myself am of opinion that I ought to be dismissed, if it shall appear that I have acted precipitately or rashly. Precipitately, after years and years of abuses. Rashly, as if an honest man could sleep, and live, and enjoy, while they, over whose welfare he is called upon to watch, who are in the highest sense his neighbors, suffer extortion and injustice. I have been here, it is true, but a short time. I hope, however, that the question will for once be, what has been done, if anything has been well done, and not whether it has been done in too short a time. For me, every moment is too long, when characterized by extortion and oppression, and every second weighs heavy on me that is passed in misery by my negligence, by my spirit of arranging. I regret the days which I allowed to pass away before reporting to you officially, and I apologize for that neglect. I have taken the liberty to request you to give me the opportunity to justify my letter of yesterday, and to guarantee me against the miscarriage of my endeavors to free the province of Lebac from the worms which have gnawed, since the memory of man, at its welfare. It is therefore that I have again taken the liberty of asking you to approve my action, which consists only of investigating, reporting, and proposing to remove the region of Lebac, without direct or indirect notice beforehand, and moreover to order an investigation to take place of what I communicated in my letter of yesterday, No. 88, the assistant resident of Lebac. Signed, Max Havelaar. This request not to take the criminals under his protection, the resident received on the way. An hour after his arrival at Rancas-Batang, he paid a visit to the regent and asked him whether he could say anything to the prejudice of the assistant resident, and whether he, the regent, wanted money. To the first question the regent replied, I have nothing against him. I can solemnly swear to that. The second question he answered in the affirmative, whereupon the resident gave him a couple of banknotes. It may be understood that Havelaar knew nothing of this. We shall see by how he became acquainted with so shameful a transaction. When the resident Slimering entered Havelaar's house, he was paler than usual, and the intervals between his words were longer than ever. It was indeed no small thing for a person who so excelled in arranging and making out the yearly reports of tranquility, to receive so unexpectedly letters in which there was no trace either of optimism or of artificial coloring, or of fear of the disapprobation of the government. The resident of Bantam was in a fright, and if I may be forgiven the ignoble comparison for the sake of exactness, I feel inclined to liken him to a little street boy who complains of the violation of old customs, because he has been beaten without previous abusive language. He began by asking the controller why the latter had not endeavored to restrain Havelaar from his accusation. Poor Verbrugge, who was entirely unacquainted with the circumstances, said so, but was not believed. Mr. Slimering could not believe that any person without assistance could do his duty in such a manner. As Verbrugge, however, maintained his ignorance, the resident began to read Havelaar's letters. What Verbrugge suffered in listening is indescribable. He was an honest man, and would not have lied if Havelaar had appealed to him to confirm the truth of the contents of these letters. But even without that honesty, he had not always been able to avoid the truth in many written reports, even where it was dangerous to tell it. How would it be if Havelaar made use of those reports? After having read these letters, the resident said that, if Havelaar chose to recall these documents, it would be agreeable to him to consider them as not written, which Havelaar firmly but politely refused. Having in vain tried to move him to this, the resident said that he must investigate the charges, and that he had therefore to request Havelaar to summon the witnesses in support of the accusation he had brought against the regent. Ye poor creatures, whose sides had been wounded by the thorns in the ravine, how anxiously would your hearts have beaten if you could have heard this request. And you, poor Verbrugge, you first witness, chief witness, ex officio witness, a witness in virtue of office and oath, a witness who had already borne witness on paper, which lay there on the table under Havelaar's hand. Havelaar replied, Mr. Resident, I am assistant resident of Lebac. I have promised to protect the population from extortion and tyranny. I accuse the regent and his son-in-law of Parangkujang. I will prove my accusation as soon as that opportunity is given me, which I proposed in my letters. I am guilty of slander if this accusation is false. How freely Verbrugge breathed again. And how strange the resident thought Havelaar's words. The conversation lasted long. With politeness, for Slimering was polite and well-bred, he urged Havelaar to turn aside from such wrong principles, but with as much politeness the latter remained immovable. The result was that the resident had to yield in saying as a threat what was to Havelaar a victory, that he should be compelled to bring the matter under the notice of the government. The meeting was ended. The resident paid the visit to the regent to put to him the questions already mentioned, and then dined at the scanty board of the Havelaars, after which he returned in great haste to Serang, because he had still so much to do. The next day, Havelaar received a letter from the resident of Bantam, the contents of which may be understood from the reply, of which I here give a copy. Number 93, Private. Rangkas Batang, 28th February 1856. I have had the honor to receive your missive of the 26th inst. La. O. Private, containing mainly the following. That you had reasons for not accepting the proposals made in both my official letters of the 24th and 25th inst. Nos. 88 and 91. That you had desired a previous confidential communication. That you do not approve of my transactions described in both those letters. And lastly, some orders. I have now the honor again to assert, as I did verbally in the meeting of the day before yesterday, that I fully respect the legality of your power as regards deciding whether to accept my proposition or not. That the orders received shall with exactness be obeyed, with self-sacrifice, if need be, as if you were present to witness all I do or say, or, more properly, all I do not do or do not say. I know that you place confidence in my good faith in this matter, but I take the liberty solemnly to protest against the least semblance of disapprobation of any action, any word, any phrase done, spoken, or written by me in this matter. I am convinced that I have done my duty, in my object, and in the manner of executing it quite my duty, nothing but my duty, without the least deviation. I have long pondered before acting, that is, before examining, reporting, and proposing, and if I have been to a certain extent mistaken in anything, my fault was not precipitancy. In the same circumstances I should do again, yet a little quicker, exactly the same. Even if it happened that a higher power than yours disapproved anything which I did, except perhaps the peculiarity of my style, which is a part of myself, a defect for which I am as little responsible as a stammerer for his defect, even if that happened. But no, that cannot be, even if it were so. I have done my duty. Certainly I am sorry, yet without being astonished, that you judge differently of this, and as far as regards myself, I should rely upon what appears to me to be a slight. But there is a question about a principle, and I have conscientious reasons which require that it shall be decided which opinion is correct, yours or mine. Serve otherwise than I served at Lebec, I cannot. If the government desires to be served otherwise, then I shall be obliged as an honest man to ask the government to discharge me. Then I must endeavor, at the age of 36 years, to commence a new career. Then I, after 17 years, after 17 heavy difficult years of service as a functionary, after having devoted the best of my lifetime to what I considered to be my duty, then I must again ask society for bread, if it will give me bread, for my wife and child. Bread in exchange for thoughts, bread perhaps in exchange for labor with spade or wheelbarrow, if the strength of my arm is approved more than that of my soul. But I cannot and will not believe that your opinion is shared by His Excellency the Governor-General, and I am therefore compelled, before I pass to the bitter extreme of what I wrote in the last paragraph, to beg you respectfully to propose to the government to order the resident of Bantam to approve so far the transactions of the assistant resident of Lebec, including his letters of Theth and 25th inst. Nos. 88 and 91. Or, to call the above-mentioned assistant resident to account on the points of disapprobation to be given by the resident of Bantam. I have, finally, the honor to give you the grateful assurance that if anything could bring me back from my long calculated and calm but fervently adhered to principles in this, it would have been indeed the polite, engaging manner in which you, at the meeting of the day before yesterday, opposed those principles. The assistant resident of Lebach. Signed, Max Havelaar. Without deciding as to the correctness of the suspicions of Slotering's widow, concerning the cause which made her children orphans, and only accepting what may be proved, that there was a strong connection in Lebach between fulfillment of duty and poison, even if that connection existed only in public opinion. Yet it may be conceived that Max and Tyne passed sorrowful days after the visit of the resident. I believe that I need not paint the anguish of a mother, who, when offering food to her child, has continually to ask whether she is not perhaps murdering her darling. And certainly little Max was an adored child, who had stayed away 7 years after the marriage, as if the rogue knew that it was no advantage to come into the world as the son of such parents. 29 long days had Havelaar to wait before the Governor-General communicated with him. But we are not yet so far. A short time after the vain endeavor to move Havelaar to withdraw his letters, or to betray the poor people who had confided in his magnanimity, Verbrugge entered Havelaar's house. The good man was deadly pale and had some difficulty in speaking. "I have been with the regent," he said. "It is scandalous, but do not betray me." What must I not betray? Do you pledge me your word to make no use of what I shall tell you? More halfness, said Havelaar, but well, I pledge my word. And then Verbrugge told Havelaar what the reader knows already, that the resident had asked the regent if the latter could say anything against the assistant resident, and had quite unexpectedly given him money. At the same time, Verbrugge knew it from the regent himself, who had asked him what reasons the resident could have had for this. Havelaar was indignant, but he had pledged his word. The next day Verbrugge returned and said that Duclary had told him how ignoble it was to leave Havelaar, who had to fight such opponents, so completely alone, whereupon Verbrugge released him from his pledge. "Very well," said Havelaar, "write it down." Verbrugge wrote it down. This declaration is likewise before me. The reader will have long understood why I renounced so cheaply any pretensions to authenticity in the history of Saja. It was touching to observe how Verbrugge, timorous before he was awakened by the reproaches of Duclary, dared to trust Havelaar's pledged word in a matter which so induced violation of it. And another thing, years have passed since the events which I relate. Havelaar has suffered much during this time. He has seen the suffering of his household. The documents which lie before me bear witness of this, and it seems that he has waited. I give the following note from his hand. I read in the newspapers that Mr. Slimering has been made Knight of the Order of the Dutch Lion. He appears to be now resident of Jogjakarta. I can therefore now speak of the affairs of Lebach without danger to Verbrugge. Chapter 20. It was evening. Tyne was reading in the inner gallery, and Havelaar was drawing an embroidery pattern. Little Max was putting together a puzzle picture, and was getting angry because he could not find that red lady's body. "Will it be right so, Tyne?" asked Havelaar. "See, I have made this palm a little larger. It is exactly Hogarth's line of beauty." "Yes, Max, but these lace holes are too near each other." "Are they, and the others?" "Max, do let me see your trousers. Have you that stripe?" "Ah, I remember where you embroidered that, Tyne." "Not I, where then?" "It was at the Hague, when Max was ill, and we were so frightened because the physician said that he had such an uncommonly shaped head, and that so much care was required to prevent congestion of the brain. Then you were busy with that stripe." Tyne went and kissed the little one. "I have found her stomach, I have found her stomach," cried the little boy gaily, and the red lady was complete. "Whose bedtime is it?" asked the mother. "Mine, but I have not yet supped," said little Max. "You shall have some supper first, of course." And she rose up and gave him his simple supper, which she seemed to have fetched out of a well-secured cupboard in her room, for the noise of many locks had been heard. "What are you giving him?" asked Havelaar. "Oh, don't be uneasy. It is biscuit out of the tin box from Batavia, and the sugar, too, has been kept under lock and key." Havelaar's thoughts turned again to the point where they had been interrupted. "Do you know," he continued, "that we have not yet paid that doctor's bill?" Oh, that is very hard. Dear Max, we live so economically here, we shall soon be able to pay all. Moreover, you will certainly soon be appointed resident, and then all will be arranged in a little time. That is exactly the thing that makes me sad, said Havelaar. I should be so unwilling to leave Lebec. I will explain that to you. Don't you believe that we loved our Max more after his illness? Now, it appears to me that I shall love poor Lebec still more, after it has recovered from the cancer from which it has suffered for so many years. The thought of promotion frightens me, and yet on the other side, when I think again that we have debts. All will be right, Max. Even if you had to go from here, then you could help Lebec afterwards on being made Governor-General. Then came wild lines in Havelaar's pattern. There was anger in those flowers. Those strips were sharp, angular, crossing each other. Tyne understood that she had said something wrong. Dear Max, she began kindly. A curse on it, will you have them starve so long? Can you live on sand? Dear Max. But he jumped up from his chair, and there was no more drawing that evening. He went up and down in the inner gallery, and at last he spoke in a tone which would have sounded rough and hard to every stranger, but which was thought of quite differently by Tyne. A curse on this indifference, this shameful indifference. Here I have waited a month for justice, and meanwhile the poor people are suffering terribly. The regent seems to calculate upon nobody daring to take it up against him. Look. He went into his office, and came back with a letter in his hand, a letter which lies before me, reader. Look, in this letter he dares to make me proposals about the kind of labor which he intends to have done by men whom he has summoned unlawfully. Is not that shamelessness going too far? And do you know who these persons are? They are women with little children, with sucklings. Women who are pregnant, who have been driven from Parangkujang to the capital to work for him. There are no more men, and they have nothing to eat, and they sleep on the road and eat sand. Can you eat sand? Must they eat sand till I am Governor-General? Curse it! Tyne knew very well with whom alone Max was angry, when he spoke thus to her whom he loved. And, continued Havelaar, that is all on my responsibility. If at this moment some of these poor creatures are wandering there outside, and seeing the light of our lamps will say, there lives the wretch who ought to protect us, there he sits quietly with wife and child and draws embroidery patterns, while we lie here like dogs on the road and starve with our children. Yes, I hear it, that cry for vengeance upon my head. Hear, Max, hear. And he kissed the child with a wildness which frightened it. My child, if they tell you that I am a wretch who had no courage to do justice, that so many mothers have died by my fault, if they tell you that the neglect of your father stole away the bliss of your life, Max, bear witness how I suffered. And he burst into tears, which Tyne kissed away. Then she put little Max to bed, a mat of straw, and when she returned found Havelaar in conversation with Verbrugge and Ducklary, who had just come in. The conversation was about the expected decision of the government. I understand very well that the resident is in a difficult position, said Ducklary. He cannot advise the government to accept your proposals, for then too much would be brought to light. I have been long in Bantam, and know much about it, more than you, Mr. Havelaar. I was here as sub-lieutenant, and in that position one hears things that the native does not dare to tell the functionaries. But if now, after an open investigation, all this comes to light, the Governor-General will summon the resident to account for it, and ask him how it is that he has not discovered in 2 years what was obvious to you immediately. He must, therefore, prevent that investigation. I have considered that, replied Havelaar, and put on my guard by his endeavors to move the regent to say something against me, which seems to show that he will try to remove the question, for instance, by accusing me of I know not what. I have covered myself against that by sending copies of my letters direct to the government. In one of these letters, I beg to be called to account, if perhaps it should be pretended that I had done something wrong. If now the resident of Bantam attacks me, no decision can be made, according to justice, before I have been heard. That is allowed even to a criminal, and I have done nothing wrong. There is the post, said Verbrugge. Yes, it was the post. The post that brought the following letter from the Governor-General of the Dutch Indies to Havelaar, late assistant resident of Lebec. Official, No. 54. Buitenzorg, 23d March 1856. The manner in which you have acted on the discovery or supposition of wrongdoing on the part of the chiefs in the district of Lebec, and your attitude towards your superior, the resident of Bantam, have excited, in a high degree, my displeasure. In your acts there is not only a want of the deliberate judgment, caution, and prudence so indispensable to a functionary entrusted with power in the interior of Java, but also notions of insubordination to your immediate superior. Only a few days after your appointment to your present office, you made the head of the native government of Lebak the subject of irritating examinations, without first consulting, the resident. In these examinations you found cause, without substantiating your accusations against that chief by facts, much less by proofs, to make proposals which tended to subject a native functionary of the rank of the region of Lebak, a man of 60 years, but still a zealous servant, related to neighboring influential regents, and of whom favorable testimony has always been given, to a morally quite annihilating treatment. Moreover, you have, when the resident did not feel inclined to give his consent to your proposals, refused to satisfy the just desire of your superior, that you should say openly what you knew of the actions of the native government of Lebak. Such conduct merits all disapprobation, and sanctions belief in your incapacity to bear office in the interior government of Java. I am therefore obliged to dismiss you from your employment as assistant resident of Lebak. Yet, in consideration of the favorable reports received formerly of you, I have not found cause to deprive you of the prospect of again getting a situation in the government of the interior. I have therefore given you the temporary appointment of assistant resident of Ngawi. On your behavior in this office, it will entirely depend whether you remain a functionary in the service of the government. And beneath that stood the name of the man on whose zeal, capacity, and good faith the king said that he could rely when he signed his appointment as Governor-General of the Dutch Indies. "We go from here, dear Tyne," said Havelaar, and he gave the letter to Verbrugge, who read the document with Duclary. Verbrugge had tears in his eyes, but did not speak. Duclary, a very polite and well-bred man, burst out with a wild curse. "I have seen rogues and thieves in the government here. They have gone from here with honors, and to you they write such a letter." "It is nothing," said Havelaar. "The Governor-General is an honest man. He must be deceived, though he could have guarded himself against that deceit by first hearing me. But I will go to him and show him how matters stand here. He will do justice, I am certain of it." "But if you go to Ngawi?" "I know this for cert. The regent of Ngawi is related to the regent of Bantam. I should have to do the same at Ngawi that I have done here. That would be a useless journey. Moreover, it was impossible for me to serve the trial as if I had behaved ill. And, finally, I see that to put an end to all this deceit, I can no longer be a functionary. As functionary, there are too many persons between me and the government who have an interest in denying the misery of the population. There are other reasons that prevent me from going to Ngawi. There was no vacancy there. There has been one made for me. Look here." And he showed in the Javanese newspaper, which had come by the same post, that indeed, in the same decree of the government whereby he was appointed assistant resident of Ngawi, the assistant resident of that place was appointed to another district where there was a vacancy. Do you know why I have to go to Ngawi and not to the district where there was a vacancy? I will tell you. The resident of Madione, to which Ngawi belongs, is the brother-in-law of the late resident of Bantam. I have said that such scandalous things went on here, that the regent had had such bad examples. "Ah," cried Verbrugge and Duclary at the same time. They understood why Havelaar was transferred to Ngawi in particular, to be tried if he would perhaps correct himself. "And there is still another reason why I cannot go there," said he. "The present Governor-General will soon resign. I do not know his successor, nor what I may expect of him. In order to do something in time for those poor people, I must speak to the present governor before his departure, and if I went now to Ngawi, that would be impossible. Tyne." "Dear Max, you have courage, have you not?" "Max, you know I have courage when I am with you." "Good." He went and wrote the following, in his own opinion an example of eloquence. Rangkasbatang, 29th March 1856. To the Governor-General of the Dutch Indies. I have had the honor to receive the official letter of Your Excellency of the 23d inst., number 54. In reply to that document, I feel constrained to beg Your Excellency to grant me an honorable discharge from the service of the government. Signed, Max Havelaar. It needed not so long a time at Buitenzorg to grant the asked-for discharge, as was needed to decide how Havelaar's accusation could be turned away. For the latter, a month was required, and the news of the discharge arrived in a few days at Lebach. God be praised, said Tyne, that you can be your own self at last. Havelaar received no instructions to surrender the government to Verbrugge. He therefore awaited his successor. The latter was a long time in coming because he had to travel from a remote corner of Java. After waiting 3 weeks, the ex officio assistant resident of Lebach, who had, however, still acted as such, wrote the following letter to the controller Verbrugge. Number 153. Rankesbatong, 15th April 1856. To the controller of Lebach. You know that I have received at my own request an honorable discharge from the service of the government by decree of 4th inst. Number 4. Perhaps I should have acted rightly if, on the receipt of this decree, I had resigned my office of assistant resident immediately, as it seems to be an anomaly to fulfill a function without being a functionary. Yet I received no instructions to surrender my office, and partly from the idea of the obligation not to leave my post without being duly relieved, partly from causes of subordinate interest, I waited for the arrival of my successor, thinking that that functionary would arrive soon, at least this month. Now I hear from you that my successor may not be expected so soon. You have, as I think, heard this news at Serang, and at the same time that the resident was astonished that I, in the very peculiar position in which I am, have not yet asked to be allowed to transfer the government to you. Nothing could be more agreeable to me than this news, for I need not assure you that I, who have declared myself unable to serve otherwise than I have done, who have been punished for this way of serving with censure, with a ruinous and discreditable transfer, with an order to betray the poor men who confided in my good faith, with the choice also between dishonor and starvation, that I had to consider with pains and care everything if it was in harmony with my duty, and that the most simple matter was difficult for me, placed as I was between my conscience and the principles of the government, to which I owe fidelity as long as I am not freed from my functions. This difficulty showed itself principally in the reply which I had to give to plaintiffs. I had once promised to betray nobody to the rancor of his chiefs. Once I had, imprudently enough, given my word for the justice of the government. The poor population could not know that this promise and this bail had been denied, and that I, poor and impotent, stood alone with my desire for justice and humanity. And people went on complaining. It was painful, after the receipt of the missive of 23d March, to sit there as a supposed refuge, as a powerless protector. It was heartrending to hear the complaints of ill treatment, extortion, poverty, hunger, whilst I myself had, with a wife and child, to meet hunger and poverty. Neither could I betray the government. I might not say to these poor people, "Go and suffer, for it is the will of the government that you should suffer extortion." I might not avow my impotence, one as it was with the shame and unconscionableness of the Governor-General's counselors. Here is what I replied. I cannot help you immediately, but I will go to Batavia. I will speak to the governor about your misery. He is just, and he will assist you. Go now quietly to your home, do not oppose, do not remove, wait patiently. I hope that justice will be done. So I thought, ashamed as I was of the violation of my promise of help, to bring my ideas in harmony with my duty to the government, which pays me still this month, and I would have continued thus till the arrival of my successor, if a particular occurrence had not obliged me today to put an end to this equivocal position. 7 persons had complained. I gave them the above-mentioned reply. They returned to their homes. The district chief met them on the way. He must have forbidden them to leave their village again, and taken away, as I am told, their clothes, to oblige them to remain at home. One of them escaped, came to me again, and declared that he did not dare to return to his village. What I ought to reply to this man, I did not know. I could not protect him. I might not avow my impotence. I would not prosecute the accused chief, because this would have appeared as if the matter had been picked up by me, Pour le besoin de ma cause, I did not know what to do. I charge you, until further instructions from the resident of Bantam, with the government of the district of Lebec, from tomorrow morning. The assistant resident of Lebec. Signed, Max Havelaar. Then Havelaar departed with wife and child from Rankesbetang. He refused all escort. Duclery and Verbrugge were deeply touched at the leave-taking. Max was likewise moved, above all, when he found at the first stage a great number of persons who had gone secretly from Rankesbetang to bid him a last farewell. At Serang, the family was received into the house of Mr. Slimering, with the ordinary Indian hospitality. In the evening, many visitors came to the resident. They said they had come to say farewell to Havelaar, and Havelaar received many an eloquent shake of the hand. But he had to go to Batavia to speak to the Governor-General. When they arrived there, he sought for an audience. This was refused him because His Excellency had a pain in his foot. Havelaar waited till the foot was cured, then he again sought an audience. His Excellency had so much to do that he had been obliged to refuse an audience even to the Director General of Finance, and could not see Havelaar. Havelaar waited till His Excellency should have struggled through all this. Meanwhile, he felt something like jealousy for the persons who had to help His Excellency in his labor, for he liked to work quickly and hard, and generally so much business disappeared under his hand. This was, however, out of the question. Havelaar's labor was heavier than labor. He waited. He waited. At last he again sought an audience. He received an answer that His Excellency could not see him, as he had too much to do, being on the point of departure. Max sought the favor of His Excellency to be heard for half an hour, as noon as there should be some space between two businesses. At last he heard that His Excellency would depart the next day. That was a thunderbolt for him. Still, he believed with spasmodic energy that the resigning governor was an honest man and had been deceived. A quarter of an hour would have sufficed to prove the justice of his cause, and it appeared that this quarter of an hour would not be granted him. I find among Havelaar's papers the copy of a letter which he seems to have written to the retiring Governor-General on the last evening before his departure to the mother country. In the corner, I find the words written in pencil, not exact, which gives me to understand that some phrases were changed in copying. I make this observation in order that no doubt may arise regarding the authenticity of the other official documents which I have communicated, and which have all been signed by another hand for exact copy. I mention this because of the want of literal conformity with this document. Perhaps he to whom this letter was addressed may feel inclined to make public the exact text. Then one may see how far Havelaar deviated from this copy. Batavia, 23 May 1856. Your Excellency, my official request, by missive of 28th February, to be heard on the affairs of Lebec, has remained unanswered. Neither has Your Excellency thought fit to grant my repeated request for an audience. A functionary who was favorably known to the government. I quote Your Excellency's own words. One who has served his country in these regions for 17 years, one who not only never neglected his duty, but who conceived what was good with unexampled self-sacrifice, and who chose to sacrifice all for honor and duty. Such a one Your Excellency has placed beneath the criminal, for the criminal is at least heard. That they have deceived Your Excellency with regard to me, I understand, but that Your Excellency did not catch the opportunity to escape from this deceit, I do not understand. Tomorrow Your Excellency goes from here, and I may not let you depart without having said once more that I did my duty, only my duty, with judgment, with calmness, with humanity, with moderation, and with courage. The grounds on which is based the censure contained in Your Excellency's missive of 23 March are entirely invented and false. I can prove this, and it would have been proved already if Your Excellency had granted me half an hour's interview, if Your Excellency could have found half an hour to do justice. This you could not, and an honest family has been ruined. Yet I do not complain of this. But Your Excellency has sanctified the system of abuse of power, of plunder and murder, by which the poor Javanese suffer, and I complain of that. That is what I complain of. Your Excellency, blood cleaves to the money saved out of the Indian's salary thus earned. Once more I beg for a moment's interview, be it this night, be it early tomorrow. And again I do not ask this for myself, but for the cause which I defend, the cause of justice and humanity, which is, at the same time, the cause of good policy. If your excellency can reconcile it with your conscience, to depart from here without hearing me, mine will be quiet in the persuasion that I have endeavored all that I could to prevent the sad bloody events, which will soon be the consequence of the self-willed ignorance in which the government is left as regards the population. Signed, Max Havelaar. Havelaar waited that evening. He waited the whole night. He had hoped that perhaps anger at the tone of his letter would bring about what he had tried in vain to obtain by moderation and patience. His hope was vain. The Governor-General departed without having heard Havelaar. Another excellency had retired to the mother country to rest. Havelaar wandered about poor and neglected. He sought. Enough, my good Stern, I multitually take up the pen. You are not called upon to write Havelaar's biography. I created you. I brought you over from Hamburg. I taught you good Dutch in a very short time. I made you kiss Louise Rosemeyer of the Rosemeyers who trade in sugar. It is enough. Stern, you may go. This Schalman and his wife. Stop, miserable spawn of dirty covetousness and blasphemous hypocrisy. I created you. You have grown into a monster under my pen. I am disgusted with my own creation. Choke yourself with coffee and begone. Yes, I multitually, who have suffered much. I take the pen. I do not make any excuses for the form of my book. That form was thought proper to obtain my object. That object has a double end. In the first place, I would bring forward something which may be preserved as a holy pusaka by little Max and his sister, when their parents have died of sheer want. I would give to these children a testimonial from my own hand. And in the second place, I will be read. Yes, I will be read. I will be read by statesmen who are obliged to pay attention to the signs of the times, by men of letters who must also peep into the book of which so many bad things are said, by merchants who have an interest in the coffee auctions, by ladies' maids who read me for a few farthings, by governors-general in retirement, by ministers who have something to do by the lackeys of these excellencies, by mutes who, more majorum, will say that I attack God Almighty, where I attack only the God which they made according to their own image, by the members of the representative chambers, who must know what happens in the extensive possessions over the sea, which belong to Holland. I shall be read. When I obtain this, I shall be content, for I did not intend to write well. I wish to write so as to be heard, and, as one who cries, "Stop thief," does not care about the style of his impromptu address to the public, I too am indifferent to criticism of the manner in which I cried my "Stop thief." The book is a medley, there is no order, nothing but a desire to make a sensation. The style is bad, the author is inexperienced, no talent, no method. Good, all very well, but the Javanese are ill-treated. For the merit of my book is this: that refutation of its main features is impossible. And the greater the disapprobation of my book, the better I shall be pleased, for the chance of being heard will be so much the greater, and that is what I desire. But you, whom I dare to interrupt in your business, or in your retirement, ye ministers and governors-general, do not calculate too much upon the inexperience of my pen. I could exercise it, and perhaps, by dint of some exertions, attain to that skill which would make the truth heard by the people. Then I should ask of that people a place in the representative chambers, were it only to protest against the certificates which are given vice versa by Indian functionaries. To protest against the endless expeditions sent, and heroic deeds performed against poor, miserable creatures, whose ill treatment has driven them to revolt. To protest against the cowardice of general orders, that brand the honor of the nation, by invoking public charity on behalf of the victims of inveterate piracy. It is true those rebels were reduced by starvation to skeletons, while those pirates could defend themselves. And if that place were refused me, if I were still disbelieved, then I should translate my book into the few languages that I know, and the many that I yet can learn, to put that question to Europe, which I have in vain put to Holland. And in every capital, such a refrain as this would be heard: there is a band of robbers between Germany and the Scheldt. And if this were of no avail, then I should translate my book into Malay, Javanese, Sundanese, Ulfoer, Bogi, and Bata. And I should sharpen Kluang's, the scimitars and the sabers, by rousing with warlike songs the minds of those martyrs whom I have promised to help. I multitually would do this. Yes, delivery and help, lawfully if possible, lawfully with violence if need be. And that would be very pernicious to the coffee auctions of the Dutch Trading Company. For I am no fly-rescuing poet, no soft dreamer, like the downtrodden Havelaar, who did his duty with the courage of a lion, and endured starvation with the patience of a marmot in winter. This book is an introduction. I shall increase in strength and sharpness of weapons, according as it may be necessary. Heaven grant that it may not be necessary. No, it will not be necessary. For it is to the I dedicate my book, William III, King, Grand Duke, Prince, more than Prince, Grand Duke, and King, Emperor of the magnificent Empire of Insolent, which winds about the equator like a garland of emeralds. I ask thee if it be thine imperial will that the Havelaars should be bespattered with the mud of Slimerings and Dristables, and that thy more than 30 millions of subjects far away should be ill-treated and should suffer extortion in thy name. Notes: Mr. Veth, the well-known learned Orientalist at Leyden, who made a special study of Indian matters, declared that multitude understated the truth, and quoted many authors, such as Mr. Vitalis and others, who had published accounts of scenes and facts much more shocking than he had depicted. Mr. Veth complimented multitude upon his moderation, saying that he displayed a mastership of art in not exhausting the subject. Hieronymus van Alphen, author of little poems for children, etc., was born in 1746, died in 1803. See the History of Holland. A club at the Zoological Gardens, whose motto is Artes Natura Magistra. Kapelsteeg equals Butterfly Lane. Steeg equals lane. See page 3. A club in Amsterdam. 5 shillings. £30 to £40. £58 odds. The Aglaja, a magazine for ladies, published at Amsterdam. £18, 15 pounds. Goffzuiger, a very characteristic name. Goff equals talent, gift of nature, endowment. Zuiger equals sucker. See page 1. See note page 4. A residency, province. Herman Willem Deendels was born at Hattem, province of Gelderland, October 21, 1762. His father was burgomaster of Hattem. In 1787, he went to France, and in 1793, he took part in the expedition into Flanders under General Dumouriez. Afterwards, he entered the service of the Dutch Republic, and in 1799 distinguished himself in the campaign against the Anglo-Russian army in North Holland. He tendered his resignation in 1801. In 1808, he was appointed Governor-General of the Dutch possessions in the East Indies. He was appointed Maréchal de l'Empire in 1807. From 1808–1811, he governed those colonies. In 1811, he was recalled by Napoleon I, who had incorporated Holland. He took part in the campaign of 1812 in Russia. In 1815, he was appointed governor of the Dutch possessions on the coast of New Guinea, where he abolished the slave trade, and died in 1818. Radinatapati is his title, and Kartanata Nagara his name. Titles of nobility: castle, palace, etc. From £16,600 to £25,000. Rice fields. The difference between sawas and gagas and tipars is in the mode of cultivation. Javanese village. A lunaloon, a square in front of a chief's residence, ornamented with beautiful trees, called Waringi. Mantri equals upper servant, properly an overseer of the building department and of agriculture. A piece of linen. The Javanese women draw figures on such sarongs wherewith they express some thoughts or emotion. Sarong, a sort of petticoat. A handkerchief tied round the head, a sort of turban. The Javanese never appears with uncovered head. Beetle. Penang Gambier, different spices. A broad-brimmed straw hat, affording protection from rain and sun. The rainy season. This is, when rightly spelt, Gagao nar de Groot Gracht, equals go quickly to the Great Canal. Griach Guit Jean Ger Groot Grogweg, equals Gertrude does not like to throw away any cooked vegetables. Literally translated equals convulsive motion. Dress. Melody equals a beautiful and fragrant flower. Kondek equals Xinyan. Payong equals umbrella, a mark of distinction in the East, a gold one being the highest. Sedan chair palanquin. Mosques. On Dutch maps of Java it is spelt Parangkujang. On Dutch maps of Java, lampongs, but on the English maps of Java, lampoons. Plantain, in the West Indies they are called bananas. Pisang is the fruit of the pisang or banana tree. The nickname in India for the child of a European and a native, an allusion to the protruding lips. Liplap equals raglip. Where capital or metropolis is used, it means the chief town of the district. The factotum of the regent, Clewan Jaxa, native officials. Willem, Prince of Orange, stadholder of the United Provinces, was obliged to leave his country in the year 1795 because of the revolution. He died at Fulda in 1806. Flowers. Titles, impossible to translate them into European languages. Radin or Radhin almost equals the French Chevalier. Bantamkittel equals, South Bantam equals Lebec. Paddy equals rice in the field. Gamlang equals musical instrument. Pachal equals spade. Banjars equals inundations. Crease equals Indian weapon. Kluang equals Indian weapon. To wander in foreign countries with kris and kluang and gun means here that those persons go into other residencies where rebels are in arms against the government. Administrator of justice. Governor of the capital or chief town. The residence of the governor-general near Batavia. Isarisaran equals as the hairs are on the head. It means the place where the hairs of an animal meet, also said of the hair of the head. It is rather difficult to explain this peculiar hair vertebra, the Isarisaran, a peculiar one, a peculiar whirl in the hair. The Jaxa saw such a peculiar meeting of hairs on the head of little Max, just as some people in Europe look at the lines on your right hand. One of the characters of a Dutch novel much in vogue some 50 years ago. Dominee, title of Dutch clergyman. Literally, day of prayers. Driebergen, a village of country seats, the summum bonum of a successful Amsterdam trader's aspirations. Dominee Wallaar and the Holy Willie of the Scottish poet Burns appear to have been brought up in the same school of theology. The opium trade is a monopoly of the Dutch government. Suite is an Amsterdamism and means a front room divided from a back parlor by folding doors. To possess such a suite is considered in Amsterdam as the ne plus ultra of respectability. On song's exulting pinion I'll bear thee, my sweetheart fair. Where Ganges holds his dominion, the sweetest of spots know I there. There a red blooming garden is lying in the moonlight silent and clear. The lotos flowers are sighing for their sister so pretty and dear. The violets prattle and titter, and gaze on the stars high above. The roses mysteriously twitter their fragrant stories of love. The gazelles so gentle, pious, and clever skip lightly in frolicsome mood, and in the distance roars ever the holy river's loud flood. And there, while joyously sinking beneath the palm by the stream, and love and repose while drinking, of blissful visions will dream. From Boringshein's poems, Lond, 1866. As Arles is renowned for its beautiful remains of Roman origin, the tower in question is probably also of Roman construction. True, the Saracens conquered this city in 730, yet soon afterwards they were beaten by Charles Martel, who took the city again. We are strengthened in our supposition by the communication of M. de Caumont, the celebrated French archaeologist, that the Roman monuments are known by the French peasants of the different departments under the name of Sarrazin. Even M. Leroy de la Brière says that the workmen call the Roman coins pieces de Mahomet. See Annales de la Société Francaise d'Archéologie pour la description et la conservation des monuments, 1865, Congrès archéologique de France, Roman 31. Session à Fontenoy 1864 pag. 6f. Translator. Headsman's axe. This appears to refer to the confident looks of the Carthaginians, who knew their own strength. Dado equals a petty chief in Sumatra. Natal in Sumatra, not to be confounded with natal in Africa. Pirogue equals piragua, a canoe formed of two trees united. Bail equals couch. Clambo equals curtains. Pajang equals umbrella, distinctive of rank, a golden one being the highest. 3 Dutch settlements on the west coast of North Sumatra. Sinkel is the most northern of the Dutch possessions in that island, and is separated by a river of the same name from the still independent little states of Truman and Analabu. Still further north commences the Sultanate of Achin. The whole coast from Ayr-Banji to the northern point is known to sailors by name of Pepper Coast. Such a foregallery is open on 3 sides and supported by pillars. The reader will find a description of an Indian house infra p. 231. Eigen hard Vielwaard, one's own hearth is worth much. There's no place like home. The lady's name was Everdeen Hubert van Wijnbergen. Johannes Henricus van der Palm, a celebrated Dutch author and orator, born 1763, died 1840. Best known by his Bible for children and his Bible translations. Het Wandland Scoresbesluit, dat Scorsend ons regeert, Jan Scorsel, gouverneur de Weerwolf onzer dagen, had zeeën Jewitten zelf met vroegd gessuspendeerd. Als t niet voor langen tade final reads where onslegen. 1,000 guilders equals 83 pounds, 6s, 8d. The English reader will bear in mind that when thousands are spoken of, guilders are referred to. This is a literal rendering of the word used by the author. Nose. 7 and 10, 10 and 13, 13 and 16 are connected by doors with each other. 9 and 12, 12 and 15, 15 and 18 are connected by doors with each other. Between 5 and 8 a door, between 17 and 20 a door, between 7 and 8, 10 and 11, 13 and 14, 16 and 17 doors, between 8 and 9, 11 and 12, 14 and 15, 17 and 18 doors. Independent Petty Princes. Allusion to Le Munier de Sans-Souci, by Andriana, in which he says of Frederick the Great of Prussia, "On respect un moulin, on vol une province." Literally, he who reigns, the highest title in Sumatra. The residence of the Governor-General. Mohammedan priests. Toenko, title of rank only used in Sumatra. Sua equals Indian weapon. The French ambassador. The General de Gramont was the proposer of this law. It was accepted in the Corps Legislatif in the year 1850. Tranquility has remained tranquil. This is a literal rendering of the phrase used by many residents. Max Havelaar has never been refuted. The laws and regulations are good. They even look so philanthropic on paper. The English reader will bear in mind that this was written subsequent to the Great Indian Mutiny of 1857. A sends more to B than B receives from A. B sends more to C than C receives from B, etc. The European and native functionaries are paid a certain percentage on products raised by the Dutch government for the European marts. The Dutch government has its coffee plantations, sugar fields, etc. The European and native officials have to encourage labor in those government gardens or fields or plantations. Max Havelaar was published in 1860. Since 1860, the Dutch chambers have done nothing but declare themselves horror-struck. Tikar a strawmet. Clapper mele klappa, coconut. Pukal ampat, literally 4 o'clock. Also, a flower which opens at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Saaidian, the child's guardian, prawn, Sudan. A person in service of the regent. The Dutch government has its coffee gardens. If a regent encourages labor in those gardens, or better still, compels men and women to work for nothing in the government gardens, these government gardens will produce much coffee, and the regent receives a certain percentage, so much for every pickle. Right Honorable is by no means a good translation of the Dutch Weledelgestrenge. It is impossible to translate this into English, just as Right Worshipful could hardly be translated into Dutch without becoming ridiculous. Dimer van Twist. He would begin the campaign as the weakest, and yet at last be the strongest. This statement the author published in 1861 at Amsterdam, Minnebrieven by Multitude. Sunda or Sunda. Because usually the governors-general have never before been in India. The late governor-general, for instance, when he was appointed by the king, had never been in India or connected in anything with Indian matters. Rice field. Crease equals a poniard. Pusaka inheritance. Such a pusaka is kept as a holy keepsake, family heirloom. Carbo equals buffalo. Clambo equals curtain. Pachal equals spade. Isarisaran, CP 143. Penghulu equals village priest. Antang equals gain, good luck. Galangan equals a trench for irrigating the rice fields. Aling-aling equals imperata cylindrica. Adinda had already learned to express thoughts on her tissue. She drew sad pictures on her tissue. See page 77. Run amok. A man who runs amok kills everybody whom he meets, till he is at last killed himself like a mad dog. Madaglap, literally darkened eye, darkness, frenzy. This is the name one gives to the peculiar state wherein a Javanese is, when, because of jealousy or oppression, he soon becomes so mad as to run amok. A sort of cane. A sort of carriage. Sarong, see page 77. A is fastened to be, then it is a sarong. If it is open unfastened, then it is called a slending. Jati equals Quercus indicus, Indian oak. Katapan, an Indian tree. Melati, a beautiful flower. CP 83. Lalayang equals kite, a game wherein they try to cut each other's cord. Often matches take place between different villages. This is a national game in Java, like cricket in England. Pagar, an enclosure constructed of bamboo canes. Making salt, this means to do something against the law. Salt is a monopoly of the government. The Javanese is obliged to buy from the magazines of the government. Saija in his simplicity is saying something which the police ought not to hear. Klapa equals coconut. Dissa equals Javanese village. Sundanese. Lejuif errant. 64 guilders. The Javanese is never without his poniard. It belongs to his dress. Kahin equals a piece of linen. Ikat pendiang. Pendiang is a girdle of small plates of silver or gold, and ikat pendiang, the clasp of it agrafe. Bajo equals clothes. A superstition of the Javanese. Indian dress. An implement used by farmers in cutting grass and wood. Evil spirit. Kanari, a beautiful tree. The kanari produces a nut, of which very good oil is made. Waringi, one of the most beautiful trees in Java. Bajajas equals crocodiles. To bring a sacrifice to the crocodiles. Such sacrifices are much in vogue. Some fruits and some pastry, or a few hen's eggs, are placed on a saucer of bamboo. One or more burning wax lights are added. All this is placed on the river, and the floating down of many such sacrifices is a beautiful sight. Bail equals couch. Enclosure. Read the address of the Lieutenant General Van Swieten to his soldiers. See Ideen Ideas of Multitude, first bundle, and the speech of Mr. Douws Dekker in the Annals of the International Congress for the Promotion of Social Science, Amsterdam, 1864. 160. But God in high displeasure turned away, and honored not the offerings of that day. Pundutin is the obtaining of provisions and goods under the pretext of government service. In the journeys of important personages invited by the regent or district chiefs, all necessaries are supplied by the population, and that as often as required. Followers and serving people summoned to increase the pomp, and attend upon the chief or other personage. Long Cross Street. In the original MS, the author wrote, "I know his successor, I know what I may expect of him." This was changed against the will and without the knowledge of the author. We give this note with the authorization of the author. Literally, for the manner in which I served.